is Decoding Learning Differences with Kimberlyn Lavelle, and this episode is The Roots of Behavior Difficulties with Michele Shilvock. I had a ton of fun talking with her, and I kind of geeked out a bit. We definitely are going to have to do a part 2, and we are scheduling that, so watch for that coming soon because we want to get a little deeper into some of these topics. Enjoy part 1. Michele, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I would like you to go ahead and introduce yourself to everyone so that they know who you are, what you do.
Thank you. So I'm Michele Shilvock. I'm a board certified behavior analyst. I'm a mama, I'm a parent coach, and I've had the fortunate opportunity for the last 24 years to work in the field of supporting neurotypical and neurodivergent children and their families. I've worked for profit, for nonprofit. I've run integrated preschool programs and supervised other behavior analysts working with neurodivergent children. So I've done many parts in my field, but in the last, I would say 5 years, I've really come into a blossoming private practice. And then I work as part of a pediatric practice, where here locally, I'm in British Columbia on the West Coast, and I am part of a collaborative model of medical practice for children and families. So it's pretty amazing and unique up here. There's pediatricians, clinical counselors, behavior analysts, occupational therapists, nurse practitioners, dietitians, and we all work as a team for families.
Wow, that sounds so amazing. I love that.
So that's where I split my time between the practice and then my own private practice and raising a small human and all the juggles of that as well.
Yay for small humans. Okay, I wanted to show our audience your visual. So some of our audience is just going to be listening.
Perfect.
But so we'll kind of explain it a little bit, but at the same time, I should say, explain the visual in terms of what it is so that they can listen and understand it, but then also explain it in terms of, just explain it.
I can do that. So I guess I should preface that a big part of my practice now is really bridging a better understanding for those complex behaviors children are exhibiting. And usually when I'm speaking to that, I'm speaking to preschool age all the way up into teen years. And I'm trying to help both educators and parents bridge that understanding for what's really going on for kids, and are we setting realistic expectations for children, and is that in some ways resulting in these problem behaviors? And it's sort of why you and I had this conversation to start about, extrinsic motivation and all these behavioral change tools that, as a behavior scientist, and an analyst, I believe there's value in them when they're done well and we understand the purpose behind them. So this is what drew me to create this visual. And I always give credit where credit is due. So the visual and the idea behind it really stems from skills-based teaching or training that's been coined by a behavior analyst in my field, Dr. Greg Hanley. And it just is a beautiful framework. So I took his idea and I've kind of morphed it to be beyond behavior skills-based training or teaching, to just really speak to complex behaviors. So many families will think, so if you're just listening versus seeing the visual, this idea of the iceberg, right? So the iceberg is all the behaviors you see a child exhibiting are above the water, and what's really kind of percolating and going on for them is under the water, right? Hidden. So that idea for me is rooted in this idea of a tree. And so everything about a tree and the growth of the tree. So if you think about a tree being the skills and behaviors that a child exhibits, behaviors don't have to be, in my world, maladaptive. Eating's a behavior, reading a book's a behavior, talking to you is a behavior, right? So it's just the things we do every day. And so the root is what's happening that we don't see. again, we sometimes just look at kids and we make assumptions about behavior because of what we see. And we don't take the time to also dig deep. What is at the root? So this is where I've got a visual that says, what do they value, think, and tell themselves? And I think that speaks a lot to where we really need to start with children who are exhibiting complex behaviors. So before a diagnosis, before we start labeling kids, that doesn't matter to me. In some respects, it will, and it serves its purpose, but I just want to know what's happening. And so that really has to start with, what do children value, whether they're in school or they're home? What are the things that are important to them? People, items, activities, times of day. I always love it when I see a kid in school who's having challenging behavior and we dive deep into values. I like recess. Anything else? I like recess. I'm like, okay, this is what's important to you about school. But it tells me a lot about a child. So does the private thoughts a child has about themselves. Do they value themselves? Do they see themselves in a positive light? Or are they struggling with poor self-worth? Because that manifests itself in how we engage, how we socialize, how we participate. And what are they telling themselves? Am I good enough? Am I fast enough? Am I strong enough? Am I smart enough? Am I worthy enough? Right? So it's not just, sometimes the iceberg is like the diagnostic iceberg, I sometimes call it. I don't know if you've seen that, Kimberlyn, where it's like, all the possible diagnoses a child could have. That's what's under the surface. I like to go deeper, right? Yeah. So that's sort of the roots for me. I don't know. Do you want me to just kind of talk through it, or do you want to talk to me while I go through it?
Right now, keep going. I'll interrupt if okay. I have questions for you. But yeah, right now I just want to kind of walk through what we're seeing here, and for those listening, so right now you kind of talked about those roots.
Yes.
And it's that, what do they value, think, and tell themselves?
Yeah, right. So that to me is where we should start when we're encountering a child who's exhibiting complex behavior. It's not just, sure, there's some very immediate things, and Kimberlyn, you've talked about them before. I've listened to many of your podcasts. I mean, there are immediate things we can do to alter environment and those sorts of things. But if we really want to have lasting change and positive impact for kids, then we really need to understand what's at the root. And then what happens is, we're often sitting in the branches with children. When I meet parents and I meet educators, they're in the branches. They're in these beautiful pink branches. My image is these, I like pinks and purples, so everything's pink and purple. But they sit in the branches, but they're really frustrated in the branches because they've got these big, they've set the bar beautifully high without understanding what's going on in the root. So if we're not nourishing the roots, then we will see leaves that whittle. Like, we're going to see a tree that's not thriving. And that's usually where I meet people. I meet people at the top of the tree, and I have to kind of help them come back down to the start, to where the trunk of the tree starts talking about core skills to consider. So before we start asking why my child won't transition with me all the time, why my child isn't doing their homework, why is that student, disruptive in class, calling out in class, why am I hearing my teacher say that my child's, causing problems on the playground? Those are all branches, right? Those are all what's going on up there. We have to start to really look at core skills. And that to me is for all ages. And I'll give you some ideas and scenarios I've seen in practice, but I'm talking about the ability children have to communicate needs. I can't tell you the number of children I have met in practice who are 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and still, well, they're going to school on their own, they have friends, they participate, they actually can't talk to me about their most basic needs on an emotional and social level. I mean, right? I'm sure they can tell me if they're hungry or they're tired, but they aren't able to articulate their needs. And they actually, so this speaks to the next one, social emotional regulation. Many of them, haven't experienced or been nurtured and supported to be okay with being mad and sad. So they don't know what to do with those emotions. So they kind of come out in different ways, right? And then this tolerance to delay doesn't happen for them, right? So tolerance to delay is a big one for me. Have children acquired the ability to wait for things they desire? To be able to trust the adults in their circle that when someone says, it's not available right now, but here's when it's available, that's actually going to happen. And a lot of kids haven't acquired or fully mastered that tolerance to delay. So you think about if you want a child, an 8-year-old, not to be disruptive in class or to play in a calm manner with their sibling, but they can't articulate in pro-social ways, hey, you took my toy, I want it back. Or, excuse me, teacher, I can't follow the lesson. I don't know what you're talking about, right? That's what I mean by ability to communicate needs. Needs are different based on age and development, but we have to make sure kids can communicate their needs, right? Have alternative ways, breaks, time away, them asking for it, right? Like, I need space from this. I need alone time. That's a big one with parents, right? Supporting kids to say, parent, I need space from you because you're drilling me right now and I can't do it, right? So that's what I'm talking about, really like deep level communication of needs, deep level social emotional regulation. I think up here in Canada, at least, we have seen a trend where there's this like universal zones of regulation. Like that must be the one and only curriculum all children should learn in. And I'm sure you've seen this as with an education background that you have, Kimberlyn. It's not a one size fits all, right? So you've got kids who haven't actually learned those regulatory skills in home or in school because they're not connecting to the curriculum being presented, or they don't understand the curriculum.
So part of this, it seems like one of the struggles to be able to communicate your needs is that you have to be able to recognize your needs.
Yes.
And I know a lot of, like, they don't realize what they need. But that's like one thing I'm constantly working on with like my kids is they're starting to melt down. I was like, oh, sounds like you're really hungry, and it's hard to have, you get more frustrated when you're hungry. I hear you. And like just reflecting that so that they start recognizing. And yesterday it was like my 4-year-old is like, I'm too tired and hungry for this. And it was like, upset about something else, but recognized I am tired and I am hungry. And that is really my problem.
Yeah. I need that need met first.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sleep and food. And then let's talk about my other needs.
Yeah.
But here's the interesting thing. And I think it's a missed part I see a lot in especially school-age children, because it's where we notice this the most, which is interceptive skills. Sometimes people call this your 8th sense. And so it's this idea of one's ability to internally recognize those cues your body's giving you. And in fact, I've met many children who, on a very superficial level, can tell you what they're supposed to do, what mad looks like, and what they're supposed to do when they're mad, what, frustrated looks like, but they actually can't tell you. And those often are many, not all, neurodivergent children. So that could be children with sensory processing, autism, ADHD. There's a variety of diagnostic lens, we look at, but children in general who really, we've missed that. We've told them to be mindful. We've told them to meditate, but they're like, dang, I don't really understand what does this feel? What am I supposed to be feeling inside? I meditate, so I understand that, but it's really interesting if you take the time to actually see, can kids articulate, can they squeeze their hands tight, tight, tight and release and describe the sensations they feel in their fingers? And there's kids who can't. So here we are thinking we've checked all the social emotional boxes.
Yeah.
But they're not going to acquire social emotional skills the same way you or I might.
Right. Well, that makes me think about some of the students we've had who the speech pathologist will tell us they know what to do. You know, we've run through all these scenarios, we act it out, they know exactly what to do when they see this scene, when this person says this, they know all the appropriate things. There's nothing more I can work on in a speech setting. Mm-hmm. Right. But then out on the playground, they don't use any of the skills that they're saying that they're demonstrating in a very structured setting.
Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely see that there's a disconnect there, a difficulty.
And here's the interesting thing, and I'll always, because I work with neurotypical and neurodivergent children, I kind of ping pong back and forth with it. But stories I'm sharing, I should always preface, are stories that the children that I work with have consented, and there's nothing, you won't know who it is, but they know I'm sharing the story, and they've said, yeah, tell the story. So I've known a young man in his teens for years, and he has autism. Autism, I don't use high or low functioning, but autism under the lens that many wouldn't know he has autism. And he's very good masker, so he can hide things really well. And for many years, we thought he had the fundamentals of interceptive skills. And here he is in his teens now, really actually experiencing some of the most complex behaviors and having a hard time. And when we dove deep and asked questions like, well, how do you know when you need to go to the bathroom? And he said, well, and he looked at me as if this is the rule everybody adheres to. Well, I should go to the bathroom every 2 to 3 hours, unless, of course, I drink some bottled water. And for every bottle of extra water I drink, then I should go an hour sooner. And I was like, do you actually feel the need to go? No. He didn't realize that was right. And as we dove deeper, we realized and it was because he said, Michele, everybody keeps telling me I need to calm down before I get explosive, but I don't know I'm getting explosive. Like he physiologically didn't see those cues. And I could behavior skills teach him till the cows come home.
Right.
Right. So, your speech pathologist is like, I've done behavior skills teaching, I've taught them the skill. We've rehearsed the skill. They know the skill, but they don't know the skill.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Right. So I think it's taught me to never ever assume that kids, you really have to dive deep to make sure unique learners really, and children in general, really have it. That's why I think any sort of standardized curriculum for teaching social emotional is a little risky because it's not going to meet the needs. It's just like a math curriculum is not for every kid.
Well, that's what I was going to say, a standardized curriculum for everybody in anything you're trying to teach. If everyone's getting the same thing, there's only a few people who are getting anything,
Exactly. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Right. Do you guys know Universal Design for Learning? Is that? Yeah. I did my master's thesis on it. So I'm big about the whole, who are you teaching to? Another conversation. But here's the other piece that I think is important. So here we are, we're working our way up this idea of the trunk, right? So when I meet people in the branches, I say we got to start in the roots. And now we're sort of we're reflecting on those core skills to consider, right? Does that child have the ability to wait, right? So now we're talking a lot about our ADHD, and for a lack of a better term, I really don't like it, executive dysfunction kids, right? Like kids who maybe don't fit a DSM diagnostic criteria, but their executive function, their impulsivity is really working against them. Tolerance to delay is really hard. Can they wait? Can they wait for something they want? Can they transition past and still wait for something they want? Right? This is hard stuff. So here's where it gets interesting. And it's why I put on the other side of the tree in bold, a calm, relaxed, and engaged child is a child ready to learn. So whether you're at home with your child or your child's in a school setting, I think we're too quick to push the teaching on dysregulated children. And so I'll go to school-based teams all the time and say, put the worksheets down. you might spend the next 3 months working towards a child consistently reaching a state of calm, relaxed, and engaged. And ditto for parents, right? Like maybe you want your kid to clean their room. Maybe you want your child to come home from school and start their homework and follow a certain level of things that you value. But if they're dysregulated and they don't have time to decompress, then you're not meeting them at their best. You're meeting them kind of the way I describe it to parents. Working parents can relate to this. The idea that sometimes you pull into your garage and you're like, oh, I don't even know if I want to go in the house, right? Like maybe I'll just stay in the car a little bit longer. And you open your door and you are still here and you're met with like 800 demands. A spouse who's asking you what's for dinner? Johnny's asking for this and Sarah wants this and Sarah and Johnny are asking, right? Like, and you kind of feel this explosiveness in yourself because you can't perform the tasks the environment is asking of you because you are not calm, relaxed, and engaged. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's sort of, I say to parents and educators, you can't move to the branches. We can't teach unless we have children in a state where they're of the mindset externally and internally ready for it, right? And so here's where, and I'll always sprinkle little bits of motivation. Here's where motivation, extrinsic reinforcement is incorrectly used. We don't understand what's going on under the roots.
Right.
We've not addressed core skills, but we want a kid to do the things we want them to do.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about when you're talking about that is like they look at, oh, I really want them to do their homework every day when they first come in. So here's the sticker chart. And every time you do a homework, we're going to get a sticker. And after 5 stickers, we're going to go to Target. And yeah. So that's where I see extrinsic motivation used a lot, where they focus on those branches of this is what I want the child to do, perform.
Yeah.
And not really meeting the kid where they're at. Okay. So talk to us more about that.
So here you've got this idea now, right? Where you want children, and we'll come to it. I'll sprinkle it a little later, like how I might bring in extrinsic reinforcement sometimes, because I believe there is a place for it. As a behavior analyst, I definitely see value when it's used correctly, right? And for certain neurodivergent learners, it's a necessity. It really is a beneficial tool for them. But you have to fundamentally know what a child values. You have to fundamentally know where their mindset is at, right? And especially as they get older, you'll want them to collaborate. You'll want them to be part of the planning, right? Of the branches. But we're not going to do any teaching around anything we, the adults, want unless we have a full understanding for everything going on in the roots and the trunk. You just can't. You can't. And so maybe this is where parents are like, well, I've tried, I used that sticker chart. It worked for 2 days and then it didn't. Well, it's not that the sticker chart worked. It's that the kid's like, well, that sounds kind of interesting. I'll give that a go. And then they're like, it's not coming to me fast enough and I don't care as much as you think I do about it. So meh.
Yeah.
Right. And then that's where
it's too hard to maintain the energy level for it. And I can't, so I just must be the terrible person and I give up. And I feel terrible about myself and I give up.
I'm worthless. I don't understand this. I can't do this. And so then guess what parents do? And teachers alike sometimes. Then we throw in a good sprinkle of threats. Well, that token economy is not working anymore. So how about I take away the things I think you like? Or, right? So sometimes, sadly, it's where we still see children losing recess, right? Like, hurts my soul, right? It's a necessity to keeping them calm, relaxed, and engaged. Don't take it away. And then kids at home who are now they're like, I can't win. So now they're operating no longer from this rational problem solving prefrontal cortex. They're back at they're at the stem of their brain, and they are operating off of fight, flight, or freeze. What are you talking about? You just right. So now we have like a super explosive kid, super fun. So it's why I start to talk about I titled the next branch as our expectations, right? Are they developmentally fitting? That's a typo, so apologies, I will fix that. RARE, they developmentally fitting. This is a big one, right? Whether you're a neurodivergent learner or you're a young child, are we asking of a kid something that they shouldn't do? A very core, simple example is sharing. Sharing is an ask adults put on 3 and 4-year-olds like it's something they come out of the womb able to do.
Yeah.
But in fact, it's like some people say 4. I think the literature really supports almost like 5, 6, right? So I think we have to really look at, are we asking kids to do something that they can do? Whether it's regulating in a classroom, following multi-step instructions, executive dysfunction kids. So not even if you have ADHD or autism, but children in general who are struggling. Here's an interesting one that can happen. I'll hear parents of school-age kids, so older kids, say to me, I'm really confused and frustrated because I think my kid can do this, because they can follow multi-step instructions some of the time, but not all of the time. And then I say to them, tell me a little bit more about that. And so guess what we find out? One of the traits of a child with ADHD is that they can be hyper focused on something they value. So when they value it, they can just like dive deep at the expense of remembering to eat, to toilet, to do anything else around them, but they can perform that task with such precision and focus because they value it. Right? That's why understanding values is so important. But with anything else, you really see the dysfunction. You see, and I hate that word, but it's the word. So, but you can see the lagging skills. You can see what that child's struggling with. So have they been taught the prerequisite skills that they need to be taught first? Like, have we actually systematically made sure that before a child shares, they understand turn taking, that they have the perspective taking, the tolerance delay? Like, do they have the skills necessary for the things we're asking of them? And a lot, not all, but a lot of the time, in fact, there's prerequisite skills that have not yet been met, right? Before we ask them to clean their room, which is often a parental big ask, can they stay focused enough to even do 1 or 2 steps of that task, right? Instead of asking them to do 5 steps at once.
And even all of those individual steps. Right. Have they been taught each of those individual pieces of even just looking around the room to see what needs to get picked up is its own task, right? Like, I can look around and see, oh, this and this and this all need to get put away. And but there's kids, especially really young, they see one thing, they put it away and they're done. I clean my room. Like, what about everything else?
I cleaned what I valued. I cleaned what I valued. Yeah. I don't care if my pajamas are on the floor. I'll sleep without them. It's and listen, the thing is, when I talk about values, I'm not saying kids are right, but if we can understand their values, it's the best way I can describe it. We can speak their love language. Yeah. If I understand what a child values, then they're going to be heard when I'm trying to explain things they don't value. Because they're feeling heard, right? Like, you hear me that I tell you that really I only value my Pokemon stuffies, and that's it. And my cards, see how they're like neatly organized over there? They're like super special to me. And I see the attention to detail you're putting in them. So, I'm using really natural ways to acknowledge. Some people call that praise. The effort that they're, right?
But there is that distinction of the abundant praise for that. To me, a lot of time, my issue with praise is when it's like condescending. Oh, it's like, oh, great job for doing that. Oh, thank you so much. And like the assumption that they wouldn't have done it without the praise, and like there's a problem with some kinds of praise, but yes, acknowledgement of what you're seeing and valuing, and a genuine appreciation for it, I think is so powerful. And that's, it's a connecting thing too. You're building that relationship, you're seeing them for who they are. There's anyone who's feels seen is going to connect with you a lot more than, oh, you just want me to do the XYZ, you don't care about me as a person. So I think that's huge.
Right. And I think it speaks to expectations, right? Because again, we set these expectations that maybe are unrealistic and we put this value on them, right?
Yeah.
I'll tell you how shiny special you are if you can do this thing that you're not able to consistently do. So now you feel less than because I've taught you to feel that way without realizing it. I've kind of conditioned you to think that way. So when I talk about praise, I talk a lot about, especially as children are young and growing, I'm really not a good job person. If a child figures out how to kick a ball, guess what's the most natural form of praise? When they kick it to you, you kick it back. It's just like built into the activity. A child drops the car down the ramp for the first time and you've been teaching them that, give them back the car so they can do it again. Like, it doesn't have to be artificial in the way of like, yay.
Right.
And as children get older, and there's research to back this, I'm not inventing this stuff up, actually reinforcing and providing acknowledgement to the process versus the outcome is better lasting.
Right.
Do you know there's a study, do you know the one they did with children? I can't think of the title, but I can always get it. Do you know which one I'm talking about? Where they had kids in a room. They put two groups of kids, and it's videoed, so you can see the video versions of this. It's really neat. And they videoed a group of kids who were given really easy tasks and praised for completing the tasks. And they were given other children tasks that were harder, who were praised for their effort.
Yeah, that's oh, now I'm blanking on her name.
I know.
But with the mindset, growth mindset.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
But it's a great example of how, for people who don't, it's going to come to me before we're
I know.
It kills me when I don't remember these things. But the reason I bring it up is because that's sort of how we set our expectations. And, a child who's struggling, the study they found, right? The results of that study were the children who were given the choice between, do you want to do easy tasks or harder tasks? They picked the harder tasks.
Right.
Because they had learned to like try and work through things that were hard. It wasn't about the outcome, right? So why do I talk about this? Because when we're teaching in the branches, it's not always about perfect.
You're cutting out. I've lost your sound.
Yeah, I don't know what happened.
Okay, you're back.
Hi. I was just saying, people can't we would sometimes rely too much on the outcome in the branches, right? We don't give enough acknowledgement. Let's use that word instead of praise. We don't give enough acknowledgement to the effort a child is putting into something. That, if it's social, right? Like, wow, man, there are a lot of kids out there today, and I saw you go over and check out the soccer field. Like, how was that for you? It was hard, but I did it. How'd that make you feel? I'm glad I tried, but I won't tomorrow. Cool. Not like, yay, here's a star.
Right. Right.
Well,
and that's reinforcing that intrinsic, how are you feeling about it? What do you see? And that's the big thing that, anytime I was like in the classroom required kind of to create a behavior, something for a child, it was always, like they had this last year, there was all these check in, check out, here's the goals that we're working on for today. How did you do at these different points in the day? So the kid comes up to me, here, you have to fill this out. It's like, okay, so how did you do on this? Like, tell me what happened. I'm not giving you the number. Like, it's not from me. It's you're reflecting on your own behavior, your own whatever. These are your goals. Like, I'll help you fill it out, but it's not about me. It's about you and what's happening for you.
Mm-hmm.
Because when it's just like the teacher just is filling it out and handing it back to the kid, it doesn't feel like they had any control over the number.
Right.
So anyway.
So, but I think, right, like, so our expectations, and I mean, this is a whole other conversation, right? But for parents listening, so can you imagine you have your child in school all day where they haven't maybe fundamentally mastered all the trunk skills, and maybe the expectations are a bit above even the bar we want to set for them. They don't have those prerequisite skills. And then we're trying to teach when they're not calm, relaxed, and engaged, but they're kind of keeping it together at school. It's like the soda can analogy I talk about a lot with groups, right? So like they're super stressed at school, all these demands, they're not really following a lot. And then they come home to you and they're like, shh, explosive, disruptive. And when we do those deep dives of what's going on at home, in fact, it's not that the parents, there's very little we're going to augment about what's happening at home. We're going to deep dive to the roots at school, right? Like what's going on for that kid at school. And that's not a criticism of school. That's not a criticism of educators. I think educators are the most undervalued and underpaid profession out there when you think about the demands in their classroom and what's being asked of them, right? But it's stressful for kids. So, last and certainly not least, then we support skill building and learning, right? It's like the branches. But there's a lot that needs to be in place first before we really want to make sure we are fundamentally supporting kids to maximize, to set that bar at a place that they see themselves reaching, right? I don't know. That's sort of the summary. And then obviously but I use it a lot with schools and at homes to help people understand the roots to the branches of complex behavior. Because everybody's in the branches when I meet them. Right. It's like, let's come back down.
Right. Yeah. Going back to that example that you're talking about, because it's something I hear about all the time. So the parents are constantly telling us, I'm so glad they behave well at school, but the second they get home, they explode. I mean, there was one where the kid was literally picked up in the minivan and was destroying like the minivan, like taking but perfectly behaved at school. Yeah. Never a problem at all. Perfectly behaved. So it was like this, it was shocking to us when we're hearing it, like that there's any issues the second they get picked up, but the second they're picked up, just explosive. So what is your recommendation that the schools need to be doing about it? Or
that's a hard, so there's a term for it. There's a psychological term for it. I've spoken to many parent groups about this and schools, but it's called after school restraint collapse. Have you heard this term? Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. So really fundamentally, for a variety of reasons, children at school are masking. They are experiencing stress. They are experiencing states of angst or anxiety, and they are hiding it, right? So they are hiding what's going on for them at school. They are frustrated. And so then this kind of like, I know we're not going to get into it as much as is where we wanted to start today, which is like oppositional defiance, my ODD.
There's so many things I want to ask you.
But it's why. So then I'm going to talk about attachment and connection, right? It's a beautiful thing. So kids are keeping it together in school. They're holding it together. They're not understanding the curriculum. Maybe they're having a hard time socially, maybe all of the above. Maybe they have some sensory stuff going on, like so many reasons. They get to their safe person, and guess what their safe person does? How was your day, dear? At the back seat of the car. And then it's like projectile items are being thrown at them while they're beating on their sibling in a car seat, because that's a demand. So I tell parents one of the most efficient and effective things they can do if they have a child who's engaging in those eruptive, explosive behavior after school is say nothing. Say nothing. Follow their lead and make sure when they get home, they have a safe, secure place to de-escalate. So if there's siblings, that might mean they have like a room they can go chill in. Guess what? They can watch something on the iPad or play video games. We have to find out what they value that helps them calm, but give them some chill time before we're like, do you have homework? Give me your lunchbox. Like, did you hand in your slip to the teacher today? Because those are all demands, right? Rapid firing, and they just sent that you get all of the dysregulation they've been experiencing all day. You don't just get, where's your slip? Oh man, I forgot. You get every moment that child felt that way in their day. And so that's why parents are a bit perplexed. And this is, you asked me about school. What should schools do? There's a lot of shame parents feel when schools are like, we don't see this at school. Parents feel like, is it me? Am I doing something? Right? So what can schools do? I encourage schools to listen to parents when they are telling you what they are experiencing in the home or in the car. Listen, because there's a reason. And so then we have to kind of do a bit of that lagging skill, raw screen inventory, right? If we don't have, there might be some clear answers, right? Maybe they have a social emotional diagnosis. Maybe they have autism. Maybe they have ADHD. Maybe they have ODD, right? Maybe they have dyslexia. Maybe they have a learning disability. Like there's so many reasons that could speak to why. But we know that within the community of autism, girls in particular, and this also kind of starts to come out with ADHD in girls, they are our master maskers. They will hide every stress in their day, but man, are they experiencing it at a really exponential rate. And then I talk to parents about, we're still post-pandemic. I don't know, what do you want to call it? But we're not back. And you're in America. Listen, you guys, I can't even begin as a Canadian and a mama of a child who goes to school in Canada, what privilege I have. The stress educators and children are under just walking in the door to a building, like shivers, right? Like it's not the carefree environment. I'm 46. It's not the environment when I went to elementary school. It just isn't.
Yeah.
People could walk into my elementary school. Nobody checked in. No one needed ID. Doors weren't locked. You didn't get buzzed in. Children didn't have to have drills for guns, for a variety of things. Up here, our high school teachers have to learn how to administer Narcan. Like stress. Being an educator is tremendously stressful. I can't even begin. So that's like a high level stress for kids. So I bring up the pandemic because it was like masks, no masks. Did you just cough? Do you have COVID? So it's like the layers of stress just to walk in a school door. I'm surprised not every kid's explosive when they're done at the end of the day.
Yeah. Well, in some I've heard also reports of, the kid looks perfectly happy, calm, relaxed while they're at school, but the parents will talk about how at home they seem very depressed.
Yeah.
Or they're talking about stomach aches every morning and they don't want to go to school and they're crying all the time. And it's like, but as soon as they're on campus, they look fine, right? They look happy, they look calm, they answer the questions, they do their work. So that's where I'm wondering, like, to me, so what we've been doing is what I keep pushing is, tell us what's going on and what we need to look at what we can do to eliminate that. So like, what is it that's causing that stress? And is there something at school that we can do to reduce it? Like in the one case, it was a kid who was just, the academic demands at school were way above her ability level.
Mm-hmm.
And she looked like she was okay with it at school, but she was crying every night, stomach pains every morning, literally throwing up sometimes. Ugh. And I was like, okay, so I'm not sure that what we're asking of her is appropriate because it's causing major emotional issues, which is going to prevent her from even learning, like, which just makes her fall further behind and feel even worse about herself. Like, we're in a bad cycle right now. So we need to change some things. So yeah, I wasn't sure if you have any other thoughts on any of that the schools can be doing.
Yeah. So, okay. This may be met with unpopular it's not always a popular opinion, but some of the social emotional curriculums actually cause more masking and stress for children. So I won't name them by name, but I think there's amazing parts to many curriculums, but I think we have to be careful that if we're teaching children that their traits are bad characters or bad guys, you know, that can cause tremendous stress and anxiety for children. So what can we do? If educators know, so now I'm going to speak to neurodivergent, we know this child has ADHD or autism, or let's make sure they understand their diagnosis and their traits. Okay, it doesn't have to be this whole superpower thing, but let's make sure that children truly understand, hey man, if you need to stand and dance at the back of the room to listen, let's support you to do that. Let's make sure. So for neurodivergent children, one of the best things education teams can do, and I speak to this a lot with education teams, is let's make sure that we understand what children value. Do they understand their diagnoses? And have they collaborated on the strategies? I'll walk into classrooms that have some of the most amazing strategies for children with ADHD. And I remember meeting a girl once, and I'll never forget this. She's so cool. And I said, what's going on for you? Like we connected and had many meetings. And she said, Michelle, listen, if I go to the back of the room and use that table, I stand out more and I'm struggling with the girls. And she can use the word struggle, but essentially that's what she's saying. Like she's having a hard time connecting with the girls. She values female friendships in her class. So now I know her values. So hell will freeze over before she'll access a tool she knows would help her. So we had a conversation with her teacher and her, let's collaborate. What do you need? Well, sometimes I need to break, but I'm afraid I'm going to miss something and get in trouble. Teacher, you won't get in trouble. Here's what I'll do to help you. And then she created a system with her teacher so she could get a need met, but we knew what she valued. So it's a big ask of education teams because I'm proposing that you be more individualized in your strategies, right? That you talk to kids who don't seem to be utilizing the strategies as effectively as they used to. So I think that that's an important piece, but I'll always go back to listen to the parents. There's something going on, and sometimes just observing the nuances of children's, avoidance behavior or how they're being received by their peers can tell us a lot. Again, that's superficial, but it can guide the discussions around the roots, right? You say you're fine outside, but I just see you butterflying around everyone. I don't really see you socially connecting with kids outside, but you seem happy. Masking's a thing. There's a lot of literature to support it. I speak a lot to schools about masking. We see the detriment that happens in intermediate grades. So stress for kids in school, we usually see the onset of social stress by grade 4, usually, because the nuances of peer relationships change. So you can't just blend. Girls are talking more, they're gossiping, they're engaging in higher level social interactions. And if you are lagging behind in that area, you're going to be noticed. The demands academically shift in grade 4, right? There's bigger asks of students. So we usually will see quite a big shift between that year. And that's where we kind of have to evaluate, like you're saying, are the demands curricularly too much? Are the demands socially too much?
Right.
Yeah. So I hope I've answered, giving a little bit more of a takeaway there for you.
Yes. There's so much. I feel like I could talk to you for hours and hours. I am like, okay, we've been talking a while. I know
we haven't even touched on our big talk today.
I know, but it's so good. So we will definitely have to have you back to talk about more things. But one thing I definitely want to talk about before you go, because we've talked about it, but we haven't really explained what it is the lagging skills.
Oh, the lagging skills. So the lagging skills is a term coined by Dr. Ross Green. So if your audience members don't know who that is, I think he's a pretty neat guy. He's a bit quirky, but he's pretty neat. He's a psychologist out of the States. Living in Balance is his website. It's a nonprofit. And he talks about, he's written the book, he's written many books. The most well-known one is The Explosive Child. And he talks about this idea of collaborative-based problem solving. But in order to understand how to use collaborative-based problem solving, we first need to recognize two things. And so one is the demands the environment is placing on a child in a given moment that results in that sort of complex or eruptive behavior, like something's being asked of that child in the moment that they can't meet. Right? And then this idea of the lagging skills are those things. So if I go back to my tree, I'm looking on my computer here, are expectations. That's where the lagging skills kind of fall in, which is what are those expected skills a child should have that they don't. And so like I pulled up, he has a really great checklist, and it's not the end all be all checklist. I think you could do a deep dive into lagging skills for social skills, lagging skills for literacy, right? Like I think any domain of learning in a human being could have lagging skills. Ross Green's lagging skills are things like, and I'm just referencing his exact list, maintaining focus, like a kid's ability to maintain focus, sensory processing difficulties, motor difficulties, difficulty expressing concerns, needs, and wants, right? Like I've already talked about that. Can they problem solve? So essentially, where's their prefrontal cortex ability at? Do they have perspective taking? Can they read social nuances? Do they read nonverbals? Can they understand the ramifications of their behavior and how it's perceived by others, right? Can they shift to original ideas or plans and solutions? Like his lagging skills, I could go on and on and on, but it's an inventory of skills that I actually think very much mirrors executive function checklists, right? So when we do an executive function checklist, we're looking at a child's ability to control their impulses, so emotional regulation, metacognition, well, in the China shop kid, right? They come into a space, but they don't read the room. They just read what they need. Initiating tasks, like sustaining task focus, realizing how easy or hard a task is going to be. Like the list is just quite long, but I think for me, lagging skills are really important. It's whether you like the term or not, it really just speaks to the idea of there are likely skills, right? When the environment is asking something of a child and they can't meet that need, there's usually some skills that are underdeveloped, not fully met yet or achieved, right? Or lagging. So I guess it's just sort of how do you want to use the language around it? But does that help answer and explain that?
Yes. And then I want to talk about that a whole bunch, but I'm going to have to stop as I wanted to also just define a couple of things. And I think we're just going to have you come back so that we can have a part 2 and go a little more depth on some of this.
Yeah.
Can you just kind of give an explanation of what ODD and PDA are?
Oh, sure.
And maybe just a little bit about how parents might have to approach things differently for those kids.
Okay, I can. Can we get rid of the picture?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm not mindful of this is its own conversation, but I've mentioned a couple of times here just about neurodivergent children. So PDA, I'll kind of start with PDA first because I'll talk less about it, but PDA, otherwise known as pathological demand avoidance, is a newer term in the research literature. And really most of the research is coming out of the UK about that. That's where they seem to be doing a lot of the research. Here in North America, there are some psychologists or developmental pediatricians who believe it does exist. There are others who don't. So it's often used within the realm of autism. So children with an autism spectrum disorder diagnosis, where they are experiencing demand avoidance that's quite complex. If you listen to autistics, so adults who say they have PDA, they will describe it as an innate, I know I need to, but I can't, right? So children in school, if you adhere to the idea of PDA, they might be children who have autism, but it doesn't matter how many sticker charts or consequence strategies or times you sit down and look at the roots of the tree, they are avoiding really following the demands of others, right? It's often rooted in the sense of anxiety. Like, so anxiety, we know it's there, but it's like you can't help yourself. So it's an innate anxiety-driven need for control, right? Like I can't do what you're asking me to do, and I need to do this instead. It is not recognized on the DSM diagnostic criteria, right? So that's the tool used for the diagnoses we're talking about today. But some families have found it helps explain their child.
Right.
So there's lots out there in the UK. There's websites dedicated, but there is some research emerging around it, and I could talk about it more in depth. I come back and do that.
Yeah, we'll have to come back, but yeah, because it's got me going in so many directions.
Oh, right. It's got me going. Go there.
Because the first thing that comes to mind that I have to wonder is it, or could it be a conditioned response of so often being told, if you do this, then you get this. If you do this, then you get this, until the kid is like, I'm not doing anything you ever say because you're always trying to control me. Right. And you have since I was 2 years old, and with all of, some of the very token board kind of issues of just very trying to control the behavior instead of understanding the child.
I can tell you that I work with some children who have had psychologists put that term on their assessment report. So I don't diagnose. But I'll take into consideration those terms when they're in the diagnostic reports. And these are not typically kids who have a long history of that kind of.
Okay.
These are kids where truly they do require, and I'm meeting them in schools where schools are like, what do we do? So, it's a longer conversation. I feel like if we start to unpack
I know, I just want to talk to you forever. Okay.
No, but I can't, I'm happy to talk about this a bit more. And I can, preface some research for if that's of interest to your audience, just for people to know and understand. But there is, whether it's PDA or oppositional defiance.
Okay, so talk about that one. Explain that one a little bit.
ODD, right? So 40% of children with ADHD, the research seems to support these days, also have an ODD, oppositional defiance disorder diagnosis. So it's quite prevalent. And again, these are kids, this is not a conditioned, nature nurture situation. These are children who require a different subset of parenting and education approaches. We really have to focus on supporting alternative modalities of communication, right? These are explosive children. So, hey, if you flip a desk and you don't have to do the worksheet, I'm not going to token economy you into doing a worksheet, but I'm going to teach you a safer way to not have to do a worksheet. And I'm going to honor you when you use that safer way. I'm going to give you a lot more choice in your day. I'm going to focus a lot less on direct demand driven instructions. So, you think about authoritative, not diplomatic, I think it's used, gentle parenting, use the term you like. I'm sure I'm going to use a term someone's not going to like. Essentially, it's connection, attachment, but boundary setting, right? Like we're empathetic, but we're setting boundaries. Children with that ODD profile, they need a more in-depth approach. It's not just boundaries with them, right? Like hard no's are an invitation to non-compliance. Hard no's can result in more explosions. A lot of those kids in adolescence, I'll work with schools. So if they're disruptive in schools, I'll ask schools for their code of conducts. Frame behavior around laws, not rules. Rules are meant to be bent or broken. They really are. We teach that without realizing it. We teach kids, you're supposed to cross at the crosswalk, but let's like break the rule today and cross in the middle. Or we're not supposed to have dessert during the week, but we'll break that rule tonight, sweetie, right? So without realizing it, we break rules, right? How many times have you broken a rule with your kids? Come on, how many times?
I don't know. I'm trying to think about that because, like, I mean, my kids are so young, and most of the rules I break are behind their back.
Well, see, but you're breaking it. But do you maybe sometimes like read an extra story because you're just loving that moment so much?
Well, that's true. Last night I said one story, we got 3.
So see, right? We do it. That's a rule.
Because I love it so much that I have a hard time like.
But we do it.
Okay, and I don't seem quite as tired as I thought, so let's go ahead and do 3.
But that's okay. That's what we're supposed to do. But if you're having a hard time, children with conduct disorders and ODD, they really need things framed in laws, right? Like, you don't ever steal. Like, that's just against the law. So in schools, I'll use code of conducts. I don't know in America, that's what we call them in Canada. I don't know. Like, you must have like, they're not called school rules. There's like a mandated.
Well, I mean, the elementary, they usually just say like school rules or like a framework. They might, but I feel like at the older levels, like middle school, they might use that same term. I'm not sure.
Yeah, but the principals usually have like, these are, fundamentals, right?
Right.
And so that's the framework we use because that resonates in life, right? Like, those are laws. We try and use different language. And then in parenting, there's we want to support attachment and connection, but we fundamentally know that these are children who are experiencing distrust with others socially. And that's not because a parent broke that trust, right? Like, I always like to let people know this isn't because you parented incorrectly. But these are things going on. They might have poor self-worth. They might have, physical ailments like sleep deprivation. Nutrition can sometimes play into this. They may require, most of the time, they do require some modality of therapy or coping techniques. This isn't just falling on parents. These children have to learn, here we go again, lagging skills. Kids need to learn skills to cope when things are hard, when you have to follow the rules, right? Because eventually you have to follow the rules.
Right.
Eventually you do. But like, I have a kindergartner right now who going into grade 1, who spent much of the year not in the classroom because our goal this year was a relaxed, engaged, calm child. And so that meant that he had urges that sometimes if we said, no, occupational therapy is not till 2:00, he's like, no, it's now. And you could tell him till you're blue in the face, but he needed to physically see that there was another child with the OT. And then he would be okay. So that's what I mean by like, you have to think outside of the box with how we support or parent these kinds of children, because you can't just be like hard no with these kinds of kids. That's just going to be met with a lot more eruption, right? ADHD kids, they do require their own subset of skills. They do need to have heavy boundaries and sometimes some consequences and frameworks for motivation to help with impulse control, right? Because these are kids that they want to. These are not innately bad kids. These are kids who really want to, but neurologically are struggling. And so sometimes they need the extrinsic world to help shape them. And that's not a bad thing if it's done effectively and well. And we're not animal training. We're helping children who are saying to us, I can't do this on my own. I want to be that person my parent wants me to be, that the teacher wants me to be. But when I fail enough times, and I use this a lot, and so maybe this is a great way to sort of end, when kids fail enough at trying to be right, they become the best bad and the best wrong kids you've ever met. Because if I try to be social and I fail, if I try to follow the classroom rules and I'm met not with the expected outcomes I was hoping for, I can predictably know the outcome when I do things the wrong way.
Yeah.
Adults are predictable. We are predictable when kids do the wrong way, right? There aren't enough of us that are like, buddy, that was hard, man. I'm sorry that happened for you. Right? How many times do as an adult say to a kid, the adults failed you?
Yeah.
Deep, right? But like important stuff. So a lot of the amazing, beautiful humans I meet when I'm bridging, I'm really helping people understand that they've become the best bad they can be. And we need to go back to the roots because they don't have the worth, right? The social trust, the self-compassion, it's not there because they've failed enough. They've been told that they aren't good enough, smart enough, can't do it, shouldn't do it, right? A lot of ableist stuff going on there. So
yeah.
Like, I don't want to end on a depressing note. It's like, it's an invitation to come back.
Right. Yes. So, until we have you back, let people know how they can get in touch with you, find out more about you. What do you have that people can follow you or any of that?
Oh, okay. I have a website. So it's just micheleshilvock.com. And then I have a Facebook. Isn't this so bad? I'm like looking on my phone for what my Instagram handle is. I'm so not a tech person. I have an Instagram account. That is definitely my passion. It's where I post a lot of stuff. So it's Michele Shilvock Consulting. That's Instagram, Facebook that attaches to that. If you're in Canada, I do a lot of pro bono work for Mamas for Mamas, which is an organization that provides support to mamas. And so we have private Facebook groups, and I do bi-weekly, while you're packing and making your lunches during the school year, we have different topics that the mamas pick and we talk about. And so I do a little bit of all that, and I do consulting work for families as well. But that's, if you just want to like follow along and hear me share my spiel, I like to think I'm a different kind of behavior analyst.
Yes.
Not a bad thing.
Which is why I was very excited to have you on, because there's too much of a more traditional. So I was very excited to have you.
Yeah. And thank you. I feel like I chatted a lot more than like.
I wanted to keep going. Okay. So thank you so much for all of it. And we will definitely have to have you back for a part 2 so that we can go a little deeper into the stuff that we didn't get to yet.
I would love that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.